There's a certain kind of silence that follows a field that hasn't produced. It's not peaceful silence. It's the kind that sits on a man's chest when he walks out at dawn and looks at his own land and doesn't quite recognize what it's become. When the ground that his grandfather broke, his father worked, and his own hands have touched every spring for 30-some years, looks back at him like something used up and let go. Dale Harmon knew that silence well. By the spring of 2021, his ground in Rooks County, Kansas had been called a lot of things. Tired, spent, hardpan. A few of the more polite neighbors just called it rough going. But the men who farmed on both sides of him, the Henley brothers, they had a simpler word for it. Dead. They weren't quiet about it either. If you've ever had someone write you off, a neighbor, a banker, maybe even someone in your own family, tell you it's over, that there's nothing left, that what you're holding on to is beyond saving, I want you to drop a comment below right now. Because what I'm about to tell you is for you. This is the story of a man, a piece of Kansas ground, a son who didn't understand, and a bank that was already preparing the paperwork. And it's the story of what happened when one of them refused to stay dead. Stay with me. This one takes a while to tell. And every minute of it is worth your time. Dale Harmon was 56 years old when the trouble really found him. Though if you asked him honestly, the trouble had been building for years. He just hadn't let himself see it yet. He was a big man, not tall, but wide across the shoulders, in the way that 30 years of farm work builds a person. Hands like slabs of leather. A face that had spent 3 decades staring into the Kansas sun without flinching. He wore the same kind of Carhartt jacket every fall and winter, the same worn-out boots from September through April. And he believed firmly in 3 things: good seed, honest work, and not borrowing trouble before it showed up on its own. The Harmon place sat 11 miles west of Stockton on a gravel road the county barely bothered to grade anymore. 140 acres of what had once been some of the most productive dryland wheat ground in Rooks County. His grandfather had broken this soil in the 1940s. His father had farmed it through the crash years of the 80s, barely. And Dale had stepped into those boots when his father's knees gave out in 2003, promising himself he'd hand it to his own son someday. That someday never arrived in the way Dale had imagined it. His wife, Ruth, had been the other half of the Harmon place in every way that mattered. She didn't run the equipment, though she could back a grain trailer straighter than most men in the county. But she ran the house, the books, the garden on the south side of the property, and, more importantly, she ran Dale. She had a way of saying the exact right thing without wasting words. When he came inside at the end of a hard day, she'd put coffee in front of him before he'd even sat down and ask one question. Did you do what you could do today? Most of the time he'd say yes, and whatever was wound too tight in him would come loose. Ruth kept a journal, a simple composition notebook she refilled every year. She wrote about the farm the way some people write about their children, noticing things nobody else thought to track. Recording what the land said in different seasons, what it needed, what it was holding back. She passed away in February of 2018. A heart issue nobody had caught until it was far too late. 53 years old. She was here, and then she wasn't, and the house on the Harmon place went very quiet. Their son, Travis, was 25 when Ruth died. He had left Rooks County 3 years before that, headed to Wichita for a career in civil engineering, which Dale had supported completely and resented more than he ever admitted to anyone. It wasn't that Travis left. It was the way the farm shrank when he did. The way Dale suddenly understood that the thing he'd been working toward for 30 years, handing this land down, had quietly relocated 4 hours southeast and didn't seem to be planning a return. Travis called every week after Ruth died, then every 2 weeks, then once a month. The calls were fine. They talked about weather, about grain prices, about the small decisions Dale was making alone now. But there was a distance between them that had nothing to do with geography. Dale couldn't talk about Ruth without going somewhere Travis couldn't follow him to. Travis couldn't understand why his father refused to even consider selling a piece of the property to ease the financial pressure building around them. The farm was 1,500 acres of unfinished conversation dropped into every phone call and never quite picked back up. Before those hard years, the Harmon place had done well. 48 to 55 bushels of winter wheat per acre most seasons. Dale had supplemented with Milo on the southeast acres and kept a modest cow-calf operation through the early 2000s that he'd wound down. When Ruth got sick and his attention had to go somewhere else, he farmed with conventional inputs, anhydrous ammonia, herbicides. A solid rotation, but nothing experimental. He was a conventional Kansas farmer and had been one his entire life. Until it stopped working. The soil didn't die overnight. That's the part that's easy to miss. It came apart over years, a slow erosion of biological life that Dale had no real reason to track until he started noticing the yield slipping. Not dramatically, just quietly. A few bushels per acre less each season. One year the stands were thin and uneven in the low areas. The next year, rainfall that should have soaked in just sheeted off the surface and left the subsoil bone dry while the topsoil crusted hard as pavement. By 2019, Dale had hit a stretch of 3 consecutive below-average years. He blamed drought. There had been real drought. He blamed low commodity prices. Those had hurt too. But in the spring of 2020, Deb Kowalski, the county extension agent out of the Stockton office, came out to pull soil samples at his request. She was thorough. She took cores at 6 locations, sent them to the lab. When Dale sat across from her at her desk 2 weeks later, she didn't beat around it. "Dale, your organic matter is at 0.8%. Microbial activity is essentially dormant. You've got compaction at about 8 inches down, a classic plow pan, cutting off any meaningful root development. This ground can't hold water, can't feed itself, and can't support the crop load you're asking of it." He looked at her steadily. "What do I do?" She met his eyes. "Honestly, some of this may need to rest. You might consider fallowing portions of it. Or you might think about whether the current operation makes financial sense going forward." What she didn't say, but Dale heard clearly anyway, was that she didn't think the soil could be brought back. Not practically. Not at his age, with his debt. He drove home in silence. That was the spring he read his first article about soil regeneration. Cover crops, no-till, biological farming. He'd seen those terms before and mentally filed them under things universities talk about that don't survive contact with the real world. But desperate men read differently than comfortable ones. He kept reading. By April of 2020, he'd made a decision. He would take 30 acres of his worst ground, the northeast corner, the section that had been troubling him the longest, out of conventional production. He'd plant it with a 7-way cover. Crop mix, crimson clover, daikon radish, hairy vetch, cereal rye, turnips, sunflowers, and phacelia. He would let it grow through summer, let it winter kill, let it decompose, and not put a wheel on it until the following spring at the earliest. He called Travis to tell him. Travis was quiet for a moment. Then, "Dad, we owe the bank $380,000, and you're going to put 30 acres in weeds." Dale said, "They're not weeds." Travis said, "I'll talk to you next week." The Henley brothers heard about it within 3 days. Carl Henley drove his truck slowly past the northeast corner in late May. Saw the cover crop mix coming up at maybe 40% germination, scraggly and uneven. Visually nothing like a crop, rolled his window down, and hollered across the fence row. "Dale, what in the world is that?" Dale told him. Carl drove away without another word. But Dale could see his shoulders shaking before the truck turned the corner. By July, word had gotten around to enough people at the Stockton Co-op that it became something of a running joke. Someone had started calling it Harmon's Weed Patch. Deb Kowalski mentioned it at a county extension meeting as a cautionary example. A producer, under financial stress, making emotionally motivated agronomic decisions rather than sound ones. Dale heard about that one secondhand. He didn't say anything about it to anyone. That evening, he drove out to the northeast corner alone. The cover crop stand was ankle-high. Unimpressive, ragged in sections. But he bent down and looked closely at the soil surface, right at the edge of where no tillage had touched in 2 months, and he found something. One earthworm. He straightened up, looked out at the field. The sky was going from orange to deep purple along the horizon. He didn't say anything out loud. He wasn't entirely sure what he was feeling. He stood there longer than he meant to. Then he drove home and wrote one line in the notebook he'd been keeping. "It's going to be a long road." He didn't know yet how long. Dale hadn't been to church more than 4 or 5 times since Ruth died. He hadn't made any dramatic exit from it. He'd just stopped attending with enough regularity that the people at Zion Lutheran in Stockton eventually stopped saving the third pew right, which had been the Harmon family's pew since his parents were young. Pastor Merle had come out to the farm twice that first year, once with a casserole and once with just his presence, sitting at the kitchen table drinking coffee, not requiring conversation. Dale appreciated that. He had no room that year for words that didn't earn their place. He still prayed, but quietly, and without the structure it had held when Ruth was alive, when grace before a meal was shared, and meant something between 2 people, when faith was a rhythm they kept together. Now it was more like sitting in the dark with the knowledge that something was there, and not needing to speak because it already knew. One night in January of 2021, Dale couldn't sleep. He got up at 3 in the morning, which was unusual for him. Made coffee, and without planning to, he went to the back bedroom and found the box of Ruth's things he hadn't opened since the fall after she died. Her farm journals were inside, 7 of them, spanning more than a decade. He sat down at the kitchen table with the most recent one, the one she'd been writing in during the last year of her life, though she'd had no reason to know it was. Most of it was practical: rainfall measurements, garden notes, her observations about the plum trees east of the house, what she'd noticed about the vegetable soil when she stopped tilling those beds and started layering straw mulch instead. Then he found an entry from August of 2017, 7 months before she passed. She wrote, "Asterisk ground doesn't die forever. It just goes quiet when it's been asked to give too much without being given anything back. I think people work that way too. Maybe the farm is telling Dale something he's not ready to hear yet. He works it so hard. I think sometimes he forgets to feed it. Asterisk. Dale read it twice. Then a third time. He sat at the kitchen table for a long time after that. The furnace ran. The old house creaked in the cold the way farmhouses do in January. Outside, the northeast corner was under frost, the cover crop dormant, doing whatever dormant things do in the dark when no one is watching. He didn't pray out loud. He just looked at the window over the sink, the one that faces out toward the field, and said in a voice so quiet he wasn't sure it was a voice at all, "All right, Ruth." Then he went back to bed. In the morning he got up and went to work. The note at First National in Phillipsburg had been restructured twice already. Ed Briggs had been the agricultural loan officer there for 19 years. He was not an unkind man. Dale had always been fair about that. But he was an institutional man. He worked with numbers and collateral and repayment probability, not with a farmer's hope or a widow's journal. And the numbers on the Harmon account were not moving in the right direction. In February of 2021, Dale drove the 40 minutes to Phillipsburg and sat down across from Ed, in the same chair he'd occupied every February for 3 years running. Total note balance, $382,000. Equipment loan, operating line, and the refinanced land mortgage, all consolidated into a single structure that had felt like a mercy when they'd done it, but now felt like a wall. Monthly payment, $4,200. Current operating account balance, $11,000, which needed to carry Dale through spring planting inputs. Ed set a printed sheet on the desk between them. "Dale, I'm going to be direct with you." He ran a finger down the column. "We've restructured twice. The bank has been patient, and I know you know that. But we're at a point where the board needs to see forward movement. Practically, what that means is this: if this coming harvest season doesn't come in above break even, we'll have a different kind of conversation in November, and that conversation will include options you'd rather not discuss." Dale looked at him. "Is that a warning?" Ed met his eyes without flinching. "It's a respectful notice." Dale drove home with the heater blasting and the road stretching flat and gray to the horizon in front of him, and did the math in his head for at least the 40th time. If the northeast corner came back at all, 40 bushels. 35, anything meaningful, combined with his conventional acres coming in close to average. He could service the note, barely, with almost nothing left over for operating the following year. If it didn't come in, he'd be walking into Ed Briggs's chair in November, and that conversation would sound entirely different. One season of grace from the bank. One, Travis called that same week, as if the timing knew exactly how much it would hurt. It had been 17 days since their last conversation. Travis opened with the weather, the way people begin calls they're nervous about. "Then, I talked to someone, Dad." Dale said, "What kind of someone?" Travis said, "A land broker. I just wanted to understand what the property might be worth right now. I'm not saying I'm doing anything. I only wanted to know where things stood." The silence between them lasted long enough that Travis said, "Dad, you still there?" Dale said, "What did he say it was worth?" Travis gave him the number. It was a fair number. It accounted for the soil condition, the outstanding debt, the equipment. A fair and realistic number. The kind that makes complete sense when you're looking at a spreadsheet instead of standing on the ground itself. Dale said quietly, "Your grandfather broke that soil." Travis said, "I know that." Dale said, "Your mother is buried 40 miles from that field." Travis's voice shifted slightly when he answered. Something in it tightened and then released. The way a voice does when a person is holding something they've been holding for a long time. He said, "Dad, I know, but I also know you're going to lose it anyway if something doesn't change. I know what the bank told you. Ed Briggs called me. That hit like a board across the chest. He called you?" "I'm a co-signer on 2 of the 3 notes." He had a reason to. Dale hadn't thought about the co-signer question in years. When Travis had turned 21, Ruth had thought it was right to put him on the notes, to make him part of the farm's future officially, to give him a stake. It had felt like inclusion then, like building something together. Now it felt like a fault line running straight through the middle of a conversation they could barely finish. "What do you want me to do, Travis? I want you to think about your future, not just the farms." "Those are the same thing." "They aren't. Not anymore, Dad." That was the conversation that ended the regular calls. From that February through October, Dale and Travis spoke twice. Once when the transmission went out on the grain truck and Travis sent money, which Dale hadn't asked for, and spent 3 days deciding whether to accept. Once on Dale's birthday in June. Brief and careful in the way birthday calls become when too much is sitting underneath them. The silence between them wasn't angry at its core. Both of them understood that. It was 2 men who loved each other standing on opposite sides of a decision neither one could afford to be wrong about. There wasn't room for both of them to be right, and neither one was willing yet to consider that maybe the question itself was different than they thought. Dale dreamed about Travis that winter sometimes. Not the adult Travis, the boy. 8 years old, up on the cab step on an October afternoon, his arm hooked through. Dale's the way little boys hook themselves onto a person when they feel perfectly safe. In those dreams, Dale never moved or spoke. He just let the boy be there. He woke from those dreams in the early dark and lay still until the alarm told him he could get up and go to work. In March of 2021, Dale sold the 2016 John Deere 8370R. That tractor had been the Harmon place's single biggest purchase. He and Ruth had driven to the dealership together to sign the papers. She'd ridden with him on delivery day, sat in the cab for 10 minutes after it was parked. Not running it, just looking out from that height at the lay of the farm, and she'd said, "Asterisk, it's a good one, Dale. We're going to get a lot of years out of it. Asterisk." He got 5. He sold it to a farmer over in Smith County for a price that left him enough to cover spring inputs and 3 months of note payments. He replaced it with a used 2009 Case IH that needed attention, that he maintained himself, that broke down twice before June and required his full mechanical patience both times. He didn't tell Travis about the sale. He knew Travis would have opinions about it, and he didn't have the room for them just then. That spring, Dale expanded the cover crop trial, not just the northeast corner. He brought another 40 acres into the no-till program. 70 acres total now under covers. Resting, building, his conventional ground, the remaining 70 acres. He planted in winter wheat with reduced inputs, running lean. Spending as little as possible while testing a different seed variety. A trusted agronomist friend from a county over had recommended. He worked the soil biology program with the focused attention of a man who has run out of other options. He read everything he could find. He joined an online forum of farmers discussing regenerative methods and asked questions he'd have been too proud to ask a year earlier. He started composting his cover crop residue in windrows before incorporation. He applied a microbial inoculant to his wheat seed, a biological coating meant to help establish root zone relationships in depleted ground. An older woman named Vera Paulson, who'd been farming with her late husband since the early 1970s and lived a mile and a half east, pulled into Dale's driveway on a Saturday morning in April with a 5-gallon bucket in the back of her Suburban. "This is worm castings," she said, "from my garden beds. I've got more than I can use. Put this in around your daikon rows. It'll help your soil biology get started faster." Dale stood on the porch looking at her. He wasn't sure what to say. She said, "Don't make it a thing, Dale. Just take the bucket." He took the bucket. She left. That bucket of earthworm castings from Vera Paulson's garden, mixed into a slurry, applied to 1,200 row feet of the northeast corner, was not what saved the Harmon farm. But it was the moment Dale understood something important. The county didn't entirely think he was a fool. Some people were just quieter than the Henley brothers about what they believed. The summer of 2021 was brutal. Drought settled over northwest Kansas in June and didn't release until late August. His conventional acres came in at 29 bushels per acre, below what he needed. The cover crop ground performed visually: good stand, deep radish cycling. Thick cereal rye before termination, but resting ground doesn't yield. It invests. And right now, investment was all Dale had to show. He stood in the grain elevator line in Stockton that August and ran the numbers one more time. He was short, not catastrophically short, but short enough that what he was carrying to Ed Briggs in November was a story, not a payment. He lay awake that October night staring at the ceiling and said to the darkroom, not loudly, "One more season." The winter of 2021 into 2022 was cold and still over Rooks County, and Dale moved through it the way men move through winters. They're not sure they're going to come out of on the right side, steadily, methodically, not looking too far ahead. He did not hear from Travis until a week before Christmas, when his son drove up from Wichita unannounced. Dale was in the machine shed working on a hydraulic line on the Case IH when he heard tires on the gravel. He came around the corner of the shed with his hands dark with grease and stood there in the cold and watched Travis get out of a car that was too clean for this road. They looked at each other. Travis said, "I'm not here to argue." Dale said, "Okay." Travis said, "Can I help with the tractor?" Dale handed him a rag. They worked on it together for the better part of 2 hours without much conversation. Travis had grown up beside this kind of work, handing tools, learning the patience of a problem that has to be fixed before anything else can happen. His hands remembered what to do even though his life had gone somewhere that needed different kinds of tools. When the hydraulics were sorted and they came inside, Dale made a pot of coffee and Ruth's cornbread from the recipe card she kept above the stove, the one Travis had been eating since he was 4 years old. They sat at the kitchen table. Travis said, "Tell me what you're actually doing with the soil." Dale looked at him for a moment. This was not the conversation he had expected. "You want to know?" "Yeah," Travis said. "I want to understand it." Dale talked for an hour about soil biology, the cover crops, and what each species was contributing to the system. the compaction and the organic matter numbers, and the earthworm tracking. He'd started doing a simple jar of water test he'd learned from an online forum about Vera Paulson's worm castings, about what the northeast corner felt like under his boot now compared to 2 years ago, the way the surface gave slightly, the way it crumbled instead of breaking. Travis listened without interrupting. He asked 2 questions, genuine ones. When Dale finished, Travis said quietly, "You should have told me all of this while it was happening." Dale said, "I thought you wanted to sell." Travis said, "I wanted you not to lose it. Those aren't the same thing, Dad." They didn't fix everything that night. Both of them understood that without saying it. There was too much between them. Ruth's death and the unanswered years and the land broker call and the cosigner tension and all the things two proud people leave in the margins of their conversations for one pot of coffee and one plate of cornbread to resolve. But something loosened, like a knot that had been pulled too tight for too long and finally had a little slack put back in it. Travis went to the bank with Dale in February of 2022. Ed Briggs sat across from both of them. Dale laid out his soil data, 3 years of organic matter readings, earthworm counts, root mass photos, moisture retention comparisons. Travis had built a financial model on his laptop using his engineering background, 2 3-year scenarios, yield trajectory projections, break-even thresholds, presented in language Ed Briggs could evaluate. Ed looked at the documents for a long time. Then he looked at Dale. "One more season," he said. "This is the final restructure the board will support without a different outcome." Dale said, "One more season is all I need." Spring came early to Rooks County in 2022. Dale was in the northeast corner by the first week of April, and what he found there stopped him. Not dramatically. There was no movie moment orchestration. Just a man in worn boots standing in a field in the early morning, and the field was different than it had been. When he pressed his heel into the soil surface, it gave. The winter cover residue had broken down into a dark mat of organic material that hadn't existed here 2 years ago. He dug with his hands, the way his grandfather had done before any instrument was invented to measure what a man's hands already know, and the topsoil crumbled apart the way good ground crumbles when it's well. Not in hard clods, not in dry powder, in aggregate, in structure, in something alive. He pulled back a section of the matted rye residue and found, without looking for them, 3 earthworms in ground that had been called biologically dormant. He planted wheat on that corner in late April using a no-till drill. Lower seeding rate than conventional. No anhydrous ammonia. No commercial fertilizer. Biological inoculant on the seed. A modest humic acid application as a root stimulant. And then he stepped off the field and let it work. Before he drove the drill back to the shed, he stood at the edge of the northeast corner for a few extra minutes. He bowed his head, not dramatically, not publicly, just a man alone at the edge of his own field in morning light. He said thank you in the only way he had ever really known how, quietly, without witnesses, into ground that was finally beginning to answer. The summer of 2022 was not easy. Kansas summers rarely grant easy. There was heat through July, wind that tested every stand. 2 brief hail events that caught his conventional acres on the northwest corner and cut that stand by roughly 15%. But across the fence, on the northeast corner, something different was happening. In the middle of a dry stretch in July, 8 days without rain, Dale walked both parcels with a pocket knife and a stick. He dug to the same depth in both fields. In the conventional acre, pale tin subsoil, dry 2 inches down, root development shallow and stunted. In the northeast corner, darker soil well below the surface, moisture still present at 4 inches. Root mass significantly deeper and more branched, reaching for what it needed instead of waiting at the surface for someone to bring it. He photographed both fields side by side, sent the image to Travis without a caption. Travis replied within 3 minutes, "That's real." By early September, Dale was walking the northeast corner twice a week. The wheat stand was even, not dramatic, not overpushed, but even in color and density in a way that told an experienced farmer something was working. Underneath what he could see, the heads filled in the final 2 weeks of August in a way Dale hadn't observed on that section of ground in a decade. He said nothing to anyone. He did not call Carl Henley. He did not call the extension office. He simply brought the combine around when the moisture was right, set the header, and began to cut. The northeast corner yielded 42 bushels per acre. The county average that year was 49. His irrigated neighbor down the road hit 61. By those comparisons, 42 looks modest. But Dale knew what this ground had produced without covers and with full conventional inputs 3 years prior, 22 bushels. And the year after that, it had produced nothing because it was resting and investing and being asked to remember what it was. 42 bushels per acre. No till, no synthetic nitrogen, on ground that had been publicly called dead. It was not a number. It was a direction. His conventional acres, despite the hail, came in at 37 combined. Together, the Harmon place produced enough to service the note in full, cover operating costs for the year, and leave a margin he hadn't had in 4 years. Not prosperity, margin, forward movement. Ed Briggs did not make a speech when Dale brought the payment in that November. He just extended his hand across the desk in a way that meant something more than professional courtesy. "Good season, Dale." Dale said. The ground did the work. Travis came up for harvest. He took a full week off from his job and drove up on a Thursday morning in early September when the northeast corner was ready to cut. Dale had arranged a borrowed combine from a neighbor down the road who wasn't starting his own harvest until the following week. Travis climbed into the cab for the first pass across the field. Neither of them said anything for the first 20 minutes. Just engine noise and the hiss of grain moving through the auger, and the particular smell of a Kansas September harvest, sun-baked straw, dry grain dust, the metal warmth of the cab. Then Travis said, "This is good ground, Dad." Dale kept his hands on the wheel, kept his eyes on the header. He said, "Yeah." By Dale's measure, that was one of the best conversations they'd had in years. The yield monitor told its story by the end of the day. 42 bushels per acre. Dale had guessed within 1 bushel. He did not celebrate loudly. He sat on the tailgate of the truck as the sun went down over the flat, stubbled field, drinking water from a jug, and Travis sat down next to him, and they looked out at the northeast corner. Cut now, the straw spread back across the surface, like a blanket, and Dale let himself feel something that wasn't quite triumph. It was quieter and more durable than that. It was the specific private vindication of a man who had been told it was over, and had not accepted that as a final answer. He thought about Carl Henley's shoulders shaking in the truck window 2 years ago. He thought about the county extension meeting where he'd been used as a cautionary example. He thought about the land broker's number and the February phone call and the 17 days of silence that had followed it. He let himself feel it all, and he didn't say a word out loud. Travis stayed 3 days. He helped finish the rest of the harvest. Fixed the south gate that had been broken since July. Ate breakfast at the same kitchen table where he'd eaten 10,000 breakfasts as a boy, sitting in the same chair, looking out the same window toward the same field. On the second morning, Dale got up and went to the back bedroom without planning it and brought Ruth's journal to the kitchen. He set it on the table. He opened to the August 2017 entry. He read it out loud, without introducing it, without explaining what it was. Ground doesn't die forever. It just goes quiet when it's been asked to give too much without being given anything back. I think people work that way too. Maybe the farm is telling Dale something he's not ready to hear yet. Travis looked at his coffee cup. Neither of them spoke for a moment. The heater ran. The window over the sink showed the cut stubble field and morning light. Then Travis said, "She knew it before you did." Dale said, "She always knew things before I did." Travis said nothing else, but he refilled Dale's coffee before he refilled his own. A small thing that was also, in the way of small things between fathers and sons, not small at all. He left on a Saturday morning. They stood in the driveway, and Travis hugged him, a real hug. The kind they hadn't managed in years, and said he'd try to be back for Thanksgiving. Dale said he'd make sure there was something worth coming back for. The Harmon place is still there on that gravel road west of Stockton. The northeast corner now has over 70 acres under active regenerative management. Dale's soil organic matter has climbed from 0.8% to 1.9% over 4 years, still not where it once was. Still climbing. The earthworm population is something Dale jokes about at the co-op now. He says he's got more earthworms than he's got good sense, and the men around the counter don't disagree the way they once would have. The note at First National is current. Ed Briggs retired in 2024. Dale sent a card to his retirement party instead of attending. He meant what he wrote in it. Carl Henley stopped at the fence line one afternoon in the summer of 2023, stood there watching Dale apply compost tea to the cover crop stand. Neither of them said anything for a while. Then Carl said, "I'm going to a soil health meeting over in Kerwin next Tuesday. You want to come?" Dale thought about it for a second. He said, "I'll drive." Travis calls every week now, sometimes twice. He came up in the spring of 2023 to help with planting. Said he just needed a few days of useful work. He wore the same farm boots he'd had as a teenager, 2 sizes too small now, and he wore them anyway and didn't mention the discomfort. They still have things between them they haven't fully put into words about the years after Ruth died, about the silence and the land broker call and the pride on both sides that cost them both something real. Those things exist at the edges of their conversations, present but unspoken. Maybe they'll work their way to it eventually. Maybe some things between a father and a son get resolved not in a conversation, but in 3 days of shared harvest work and a cup of coffee poured without being asked for. Some ground heals quietly, without needing to announce itself. Dale believes now that this is true of more than soil. Before you go, I want to ask you something. Have you ever watched something get written off? A piece of ground, a relationship, a family, a dream, by people who couldn't see what you could see in it? Did you stay anyway? Did you keep working the ground even when it refused to answer? Drop a comment below. Tell me what you kept faith with when everyone around you said it was done. Tell me what came back. I read every one of these comments, and I want to know your story. The bank and the barn is here for exactly these kinds of stories. If this one meant something to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it right now. Subscribe so you're here when the next one comes. Because there are more stories waiting to be told. And some of the best ones are just now starting to come up through the ground.